Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming along. This session is going to be focusing on citizen engagement through data portals. And we have a fantastic panel of speakers representing the best of the UK, Europe, and also kind of the civil society and kind of external expert space as well. The session, as I say, is going to be run in two parts. So we're going to begin with some presentations from all of our speakers. We're going to talk a bit about our kind of stories and some of examples of citizen engagement over time in our various kind of areas. And then I will be opening up to a discussion session with everybody to kind of raise their hands if you have any comments to make, any questions. And we're really interested in understanding, what is it that users are looking for from data? What is the kind of, are there any good examples of experiences that you've had with open data? Are there any lessons that we can learn from the way things are done in different parts of the world? And, really just keen to get into those questions, once we've had our presentation. So with that being said, I'd like to quickly introduce my panel. So if I could start by introducing Beatriz, if you'd like to just say who you are and where you're from.
I'm Beatriz Fernandez. I'm working in the EU Open Data portal in the Publications Office of the European Commission. I'm very glad to be here.
Thanks, Beatriz. Agnieszka?
Yes, hello. My name is Agnieszka Zajac. I also work at the Publications Office of the European Union on open data in EU.
Fantastic, brilliant. And if I could welcome Olivier.
Hello, everyone. I'm Olivier Theroux. I'm the Head of Research and Development at the ODI, the Open Data Institute. And Gianfranco?
And my name is Gianfranco Cecconi, Italian name, but I actually live in the Netherlands. Work for Capgemini Invent that leads a large group of companies that for the European Union runs the European Data Portal. Similar service to the one from Agnieszka and Beatriz, but at the service of the member states in this case.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. So if we can begin, I will just share my screen. Fingers crossed. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Technical hurdles have been overcome. So as I say, this session is going to be talking all about citizen engagement through data portals. And I would like to begin. My name's Sam Roberts. I don't know if I mentioned. I'm the head of Open Data and Open Government Policy at the UK Cabinet Office. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the UK story to begin with. So we talk about open data, we're really talking about transparency and openness. And the UK has a kind of a long history over particularly the last decade of doing quite a lot of work in this space. So we've had a policy which we call open by default for public sector data across all government departments that came into power around 2012 with the white paper that we released called Unleashing the Potential. And what this white paper does, it basically espouses the benefits of open data for three kind of main areas. First, accountability. So we feel that driving trust in decision-making is helped by being transparent about the evidence base and the deliberation that we go through behind policy development. Secondly, it's around efficiency. So by publishing open data, it's actually easier to spot issues within the system. So we can spot duplication, systemic issues, and we can review and address those. And thirdly, economic outcomes. So by making data freely available, it's possible for innovative companies to use these for the basis of new products, etc. So those are the kind of backgrounds. So this is a little bit of a kind of a map of our history over the last 10 years. There's quite a bit missing from here, and it's quite a busy slide. So I will just kind of draw out a few things in this that I think are really key to this conversation. So I really want to draw everyone's attention to the first UK National Action Plan for Open Government in 2011, which actually committed us to making a number of quite kind of ambitious, and I would say at the time, probably world-leading commitments around open data publication, beneficial ownership, and various other kind of things. You'll see that we also created in 2012 what we call ODUG, which stands for the Open Data User Group. So we were very focused on not just having internal conversations around transparency and accountability, but actually allowing others to come and feed in and tell us what they needed to see from government to be trusted. We also set up things like the Public Sector Transparency Board, which is a very senior level board to hold departments to account and ensure that we're releasing data as much as possible. And then we've also done a number of UK national action plans over the last 10 years that built upon those initial kind of commitments around releasing more and more data in more and more areas. And again, listening to what the public are saying, listening to what citizens, civil society groups are telling us. And you'll see that in 2017, we released £100 billion worth of grants. And then last year, we managed to kind of create all of that grant data to a particular standard, which has meant a lot more can be done with the information. So the initial kind of flurry of activity back in the early 2010s has kind of been followed by slower, more incremental improvements to the data that we release. And I think that's a really important narrative point to make, which is that the initial kind of excitement around the agenda, there's a flurry of open data being released, But in recent years, we've been focusing much more on how do we release meaningful data? How do we make it better quality? And how do we respond to the needs of citizens and people outside of government? So just to say a bit about the environment for open data in the UK, we have a license, we call it the Open Government License. What this allows us to do is basically release data openly under an unlimited reuse license. So it's a bit of a technical issue. It's something just to kind of explain. It may be slightly different in different territories, but this is the way that we do it in the UK. We release all of our open data under the Open Government License. And then to the point of this session, we release all of it on our central government portal, or at least our central government portal acts as a central point of contact for all of this data. So what this website does, data.gov.uk, aka Find Open Data, it allows you to search all the data that we put out. There are a number of thematic areas that you can see from this screenshot. You've got the business and the economy, environment, crime and justice, etc. And we work hard across government departments to make sure that data is published and up to date. There's a long way to go yet, but we've done a pretty good job so far, and we're looking to try and move forward from this over the next few years. And this session really is a timely one because we are just about to begin that process of thinking about what the next wave of open data portal looks like, what the next wave of engagement looks like. I wanted to talk a little bit about some case studies as well, just to exemplify how we use open data in the UK. I've already mentioned it, but we've published over £32 billion worth of data on grants that we give out as government. And that's been published to what they call the 360 Giving Standard, which is a particular gold standard that means that data is searchable, it can be referenced, and it can be kind of fed into a central navigation platform that will allow all kinds of cross-referencing to take place, which is fantastic. Crucial for public transparency, but also allows new kinds of insight into the kinds of projects being selected for funding, types of organizations being awarded money, and also evaluations of the grants that we're giving out in terms of value for money for the UK taxpayer effectively. We also have this thing called the Casey project. This is about using open data back within government around decision making. So how do we ensure that contracts for new services are being looked at in kind of timely and sensible decisions are being made about procurement? It's a really fantastic tool. We're going to be changing that shortly because we have a new regime coming in this year. So again, this is a really timely place to have this conversation. Finally, open data communities. It's all about using local data. All data that is collected across the UK is done at a local level for the most part, and it's something that we can then use, develop new platforms, new tools for as well. So those are just 3 case study examples of what we've been doing with open data. So I really wanted to focus on engagement because that's really what this session's all about. It's about how do we engage with our citizens and how do we do things that are meaningful. So I wanted to bring these out real quick. These are the principles of open government. So transparency, participation, and accountability. Those are 3 things that we think are absolutely key to making sure that when we're engaging with citizens, it is credible. And so in the ways that we've been kind of talking to people, in the ways that we've been prioritizing open data, we've been working hard to make sure that these are the 3 things that we have in mind at all times. As you can see from our last UK National Action Plan, we created a number of commitments that we looked at through this lens. So grants data, open contracting data, natural resource transparency around data published for extractives, and things again around local transparency, ensuring that local areas are reporting on what they're working on. But entwined with that data is also the participation aspect. So we need to make sure that we're engaging publicly when we're creating these policies. We need to make sure that we're looking at open policy making and being as kind of transparent as possible in the ways that we're making decisions. And we've also had a number of kind of projects looking at things like local area citizen assemblies and knowledge sharing across the countries of the UK, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. So these are the kind of areas we feel that they're absolutely linked to this agenda because data isn't really that important. Data in and of itself is not the answer here. The answer is around making meaningful open data that resonates with users. As I say, this is kind of a little bit of a map about the principles and how they map against the stages of policy development. And as a result of this process, we've also created a tool which we call the Open Government Playbook. I'll send out links to this. People can find this on gov.uk. It's basically just a way of thinking through those different aspects of participation, transparency, and accountability when you're making decisions in a public, public sector sphere. So current activity, things that we're doing at the moment and why this session is really important to us. We're exploring the development of various, different mechanisms to deliver transparency on the use of things like algorithms, facilitating semi-autonomous decision-making within the public sector. Really important that we kind of think about how algorithmic transparency is going to translate to policy making and how we can make that as open as possible with citizens and the public. Secondly, we are developing data standards. We have a new data standards authority here in the UK. Again, all this information is online, so I would welcome comments and feedback from the members of this panel and also from participants in this session. We're looking to try and create better quality data that we push out to the public, and hopefully that will become a better outcomes, for citizens as well. And we've also done these 3 things. We've created the Open Government Playbook, as I've already mentioned. We've published our 3rd version of the Data Ethics Framework, which is all about transparency. and accountability as well. And we also have our new API catalog, which is about making sure that government data can be accessed in modern ways and not just CSV files sitting on servers. Those are the kind of things we're working on at the moment. So that's a little bit of a walk through what the UK has been doing, but I'd love to throw over to my colleagues, Beatriz and Agnieszka, to talk through some of the EU work.
Yes, so thanks a lot, Sam. So I will take over with the introduction, and then my colleague Beatriz will provide you more insight into the examples and what we are doing with citizens engagement. Let's move on to the next slide. So yes, please go on. Please go on to the next slide. So in Europe, as you probably know, the legislative landscape is governed by the Public Sector Information Directive, which was renamed in 2019 also to PSI and Open Data Directive. And for the Commission, we have a legislative document, which is a Commission decision on reuse, that was complemented in 2019 by the decision on reuse instrument adopting Creative Commons CC BY as main reuse instrument. This decision, the first one, established also the EU Open Data portal, so the portal that we will present it to you today. Now we are also, let's say, facing much broader discussion about open data. The Commission is working towards the establishment of a common European data space. So last year issued a data strategy in February, and a proposal for Data Governance Act. Nowadays, in the preparation, there is a list of high-value datasets that should be delivered through API and in better quality. And in preparation, there is a Data Act. So let's move on. So the EU Open Data Portal is a central point of access to data from EU institutions, primarily from the Commission, but we also have data from the Parliament and the Council and other institutions. In total, from 86 publishers and over 15,000 datasets. We also collect examples of reuse in part of the portal called applications, where we have also some visualizations of the data showing people how public data can be used also for other purposes. And we manage the portal in 23 languages, what adds, of course, the complexity, but it's really important for our multilingual environment. Let's move on. So we have publishers from various agencies, so it's not only from Brussels and Luxembourg, but agencies are spread around Europe from 27 countries, as you can see it here. Let's move on. And the portal as a catalog of metadata serves as a sort of intermediary or interface between users and publishers. So it's not only a technical infrastructure, but also our team is talking to publishers, so data providers, trying to help with the creation of the metadata and listening to users to see what data we should release in priority, what are the, let's say, the needs with regards to the formats, and also trying to gather their feedback with regards to data quality and the way how we provide the services for the portal. Let's move on. So for citizens engagement, as Sam said, we believe that open data is a very important factor contributing to the transparency of the government. But not only that, we collect and store a lot of data that has potential for reuse, to create additional services by developers, by researchers, and also to inform properly citizens. So we get closer to citizens by providing trustful and, let's say, information in the format that is useful and that is open. Let's move on. So we are trying to listen to citizens, and we do it in various ways. We have very often a survey on the portal where we collect input regarding the data, but also the functionalities of the portal. And we also invite people to suggest a data set. And through this invitation, people sometimes suggest the missing data or what they cannot find. but also provide requests for more open formats. For instance, if they cannot find the data in CSV, but it's only in PDF, or they provide suggestions for enrichment of the data. We also look at the categories that are established in the directive for reuse, because we know that in the future we will need to provide them through API and also in more open formats. And on the basis of that, we are creating our strategy and priorities, because of course, out of all this wealth of data, we need to select something in priority for publishing. Let's move on. And also we take into account the profiles of our users. Since the creation of the portal, we actually observed that a lot of our users are coming from research universities, so many students, professors, analyzing the data or using them for different research purposes, for master theses, etc. There are also quite a lot of users from public administrations, from EU itself, but also national administration, and various journalists as well, using it for communication purposes. Let's move on. And so on the basis of the, let's say, this analysis and also what is happening now in the world with the pandemic, we decided to set up priorities for this year in terms of topics, and continue publishing data as much as possible around health, science and technology that can help us to tackle the crisis, and also in economy and finance, as we know that, of course, we will need a lot of information for recovery purposes. And we also want to focus on data quality. So we mean by that metadata quality, a very good description of what is behind for discoverability and search, but also on the, let's say, data set themselves, and like this to better respond to the users and publishers. And we continue also working as an interinstitutional interface to put together all the institutions together and provide this information in a similar way, in the way that is also interoperable, and allowing people to put this information together in harmonized way. Let's move on. So now I pass the ball to Beatriz, who will tell you more about our concrete examples and actions with regards to citizens engagement. Thanks a lot. Beatriz, you are on mute.
Yes, thank you. So thank you very much, Agnieszka. How are we engaging with our citizens? I'm going to very briefly share with you 3 examples. And to put this in context, we are based in Luxembourg, in the center of Europe, and our citizens, our users come from all over Europe and beyond. And also the publishers that Agnieszka was mentioning are in agencies and institutions. So it's not the national level, but it's institutional level. So just to put this a little bit in context. So then here come the 3 examples. One of them is EU Datathon. It's an annual open data competition to promote the reuse of data. So another one is data visualization. We have a number of initiatives which are have in mind raising the visualization skills inside the EU so that we can better communicate with our users. And the third one are a series of EU open data webinars, which focus on very concrete and practical examples with the users. So I'm going to elaborate a little bit on each one of them. Okay, EU Datathon. These are the faces of the 12 finalist teams of our last Datathon. We had 12 teams from all over Europe, and also from Australia, from USA, and from Kenya. And the idea of this annual competition is to promote the reuse of data by calling people to develop applications which offer very concrete solutions for businesses and for citizens. The challenges are aligned every year with European strategic priorities, such as the European Green Deal, which in turn have been designed to have a very direct and positive impact on citizens, on businesses, etc. If we move on, please. This is one very concrete example of the winner of last year's Datathon on the category European Green Challenge. The team presented a visually impressive open data open source platform, which mapped how the waste travels through the European countries and how waste can be managed throughout these countries. So it applied very innovative techniques for data mining and analysis and visualized them in a very interactive and attractive way, which brought very concrete solutions to businesses and citizens in Europe. Next one, please. So another purpose of these datathons is to make the teams discover open data. So before the final event, we organize dedicated webinars to show participants how to use certain data sets, and also to have the publishers explain how these data sets can be combined in order for teams to be inspired and to know what to, have ideas on what to develop. And this is really very, very much appreciated by potential applicants. And now for 2 years, we have started to collect in a very structured way feedback on the experiences of those teams that have been selected to be finalists in Datathon. And this is very appreciated once again, because we close the loop between the participants to the competition and the data providers or the publishers, as Agnieszka was mentioning before. Another example, data visualization activities. We organized the first conference aimed for EU public sector to raise the visualization skills and to bring together practitioners in this area, because we use data visualization as one key tool to communicate effectively with citizens and to improve accountability and transparency. Following the DataVis conference, last year we started a series of webinars focusing on different topics with external and internal speakers and experts on these topics, and they are very, very much appreciated. All of them can be found on YouTube. These are some testimonials, which we can go over very quickly, of citizens and people who have participated in the webinars or in Datathon. We can move over to the next one. So now we have launched last Friday the very first EU Open Data Days, which will take place in November next year. The logo is Shaping Our Future with Open Data. And it's a combination of the DataVis conference and the annual competition EU Datathon. It's an international conference, open, online, focusing on these two topics, open data and data visualization. And it's, again, has the purpose to really engage with citizens and for policymakers to use open data and data visualization to better serve them. If we can play on the video, if it works, it could be great. Thank you. Okay, so that was it from the ODP portal. Now it's your time. We're looking forward to hear from you and have your questions. Thank you very much. Over to, I think now it's Olivier. Yes, Olivier.
Indeed, thank you very much, Beatriz. Unlike my co-panelists today, I don't have that first-hand experience with kind of running portals and working on that kind of engagement. But I thought I would bring in the perspective of the work that I've been doing with my team at the Open Data Institute. Next slide, please, Sam. So at the ODI, we really work on a broad set of things. We've got this pretty theory of change that we're working towards a world where data works for everyone, and openness is a big part of this. But as are other things like trust, like ethics, like innovation capability. But there's quite a lot of engagement as well. So the key topics of today's session are very much core to what we do at the ODI. When I joined in the ODI in 2017, my first reaction was that the state of open data and open data portals especially was a little bit this. The next slide, please, Sam. Some of you may know that from a film called Field of Dreams. But there was that notion that if you build it, they will come, that we had built portals, put a lot of good data in there, and that somehow it would become useful. But when you looked at the time at kind of research on how users perceived the portals, it was not such a pretty picture. I was talking to people in the past few years, and there's a notion that kept coming out, that notion of open data hangover, that we had been drunk on open data but not really figured out what would work. So on the user perspective, there's this quote here from Cesar Hidalgo that he wrote in a Scientific American article in 2016. If you can show it, yeah. He basically says, that the open data portals are basically as if you were in a supermarket with all the boxes looking the same. He means by that the portals had to be made much more accessible, that the data needed to be much more findable. But one of the things that I did with my team when I started our 4-year R&D program was to look at the experience of publishers. I'm going to need you to skip 2 slides, Sam, because I think there's a duplicate. Next one, yeah. And so we did a mapping of the needs and the barriers and the issues that data publishers were seeing. And it wasn't a very pretty picture. There was a lot of red tape, a lot of feeling not supported. But one of the things that was quite clear was that there was a fear about quality, and that came from 2 things. One was lack of tools to make sure that the quality of the data was good enough, but there was also a lack of a feedback loop. And you can show the next slide. There's a zoom on one of that mapping, and it's basically I don't know what data is useful to potential users. There was that lack of engagement and actual conversations between the publishers and the users. So in 2019, when we worked with the team at the Greater London Authority, GLA, on their London data store, which you can show next on this next slide, we basically worked a lot with users and publishers, and sometimes having both users and publishers in the same room, thinking about what do they need, what are the issues that they're seeing, and what should really the next generation of data portals do. And we came up with 4 fairly practical recommendations in that 29 piece of work, which is shown here on the next slide. And they're fairly simple, but actually quite a lot of work to implement. Showcase data reuse. That's something that some data portals do very well. I tend to show, and hopefully my colleagues on the panel won't mind that I'm mentioning others, but the portals of the French government or the portals of the city of Barcelona have had for a long time that kind of showcasing data reuse. But beyond that, documenting best practices. A lot of the people who end up on data portals don't necessarily know what to do with the work. So the showcasing reuse is one thing, but what are the good practices? What should be done? What is good? And going beyond that, there's a need often to make sure that the data is standardized and organizing the community so that the standards are adopted and developed in coordination with the people who are going to be using the data so that it is fit for purpose rather than being requiring a lot of transformation between the time it is published, downloaded, or accessed through APIs and actually used. And more generally, encouraging and facilitating collaboration. But the big thing, that's all right. The big thing was really those recommendations. Underlying that was a recommendation that the teams behind data portals changed their mindset from being a better publisher of open data, which is what we've got here on the next slide, to a different mission statement, to be a trusted guidance steward to the data community. And that means all those things I mentioned, showcasing reuse, really organizing with the community so that the users can learn from other users and not just find data and figure out whatever to do with that data on their own, best practices and so on and so forth. But that also came with 2 hypotheses, I think that's how I would call that, that are possibly a little bit controversial, and I wanted to end with in this very short presentation. First, hypothesis that actually is something that the London Data Store team adopted and are pursuing, is that the data portals shouldn't just be open data portals. And I know that is probably completely heretical of me to say in today's event, or maybe not, worth discussing. But really, the value that we're seeing is that a good portal should be making sure that data goes to the people who need it. And therefore, they should be not just about open data, but about data access more generally. And that's where we use as a way to explain that making sure that the data gets to the people who need it in the way that it is as open as possible means that indeed some of it, a lot of it, can and should be open, but some of it can be through the same means, through the same portals, through the same tools, through the same APIs, made access publicly, but without an open license, or even just accessed a little bit more securely, because those are the same tools. And that then leads you to much more collaborations, not just between that notion of the publisher to the user, but then you end up with organizations that are a little bit of both, that are publishers of some data, but users of other data. And that leads me to my second hypothesis, which is that we should try, in some cases, and that's my next and last slide, do away with that notion that there are publishers on one hand that lobbing the data over to the data portal where the users are going to see it. Instead, we should think of it as a community of users, publishers, roles that some people take at different times in order to make sure that data is accessible, contextualized, usable, and then showcased in use so that people know what to do with it. And that's it for my two small provocations, and I'm going to hand back to Gianfranco.
Thanks, Oliver. And I'm quite glad to be at the end, because the little content I prepared for you fits very naturally with the story we've told until now. And I will try to be very, very down to earth and pragmatic, and giving you a little recipe on how actually to get into engagement. Just a little reminder of who we are. The European Data Portal is a European Union initiative to support the implementation of the data strategy. We've been around for 6 years now, 6 years to come still, so you're not getting rid of us anytime soon. And before I start telling my story, I would like to make one specific point. Sam, if you can go to the next one. We're talking about engagement, and just by chance this morning, I read this beautiful quote on an article in the MIT Technology Review. Engagement can be positive, engagement can be dark. Hani Farid is a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and he reminds us of the strange ways by which you can interpret the point of engagement. And the engagement that we're looking for in citizens is not the one you may perhaps think about when thinking about the big digital platform for social networking, for example. Send to the next one, please. So we're not selling shampoo. We're not trying to keep you on the website for as long as possible, find out who all of your friends are, trying to convert the leads into sales. That's not the kind of engagement we need. It's more the next kind. It's very simple. Find the data you need or the information you need. Go away. Don't stay on the portal. It's not important that you stay with us and change the world, or at least change Europe. I mean, we're talking about the European Data Portal after all. Of course, this is the context. We have so much to do, and the data is just an enabler for you to do something with it. It's not about the portal. The portal is a tool for you to do something. And the European Union, particularly for our American audience, it's not a little country or little land to take care of. It's 27 member states. Agnieszka talked about this earlier. It's almost 1.5 times the population of the US, and the market size is enormous. All the businesses and market you can tackle also thanks to the data. Send to the next one, please. So we said already that for us in Europe, open data is the law of the land. 3 different directives, that is actually the soft legal instrument Europe uses with the member states, and more recently also going into shared data. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but if you go to the next one, this needed an implementation instrument, and like the other portals we talked about, the member states needed one as well. Since 6 years ago, again, we needed to stimulate the data to be published, which is the basic starting point for everybody, as Olivier reminded us, and we moved on. And we moved on thanks to this recipe, those 6 points. You can engage citizens by enabling them to discover the data, and the choice of word is very, very specific, and I'll tell you more, by using the data and demonstrating its value, by researching and demonstrating more of what can be done with it, educating them, communicating, and there's a two-way communication Olivier reminded us of, and focusing. That is a more recent thing that I will tell you about. So let's start with the 6, discovering them. So we will still need a portal for a while. It's still a bit confusing out there. Some of our users may prefer going to national portals, regional portals. The smart one may go as close to the source as possible, say the Department of Transport or the city of Barcelona, because I need to research there. But in many cases, we may still need catalog or meta catalogs like the European Data Portal. In some cases, only meta catalog can do things like translating in all the EU languages the metadata that describes those datasets. So each of the specific elements in this wide sector offering has its own peculiarities. The more we, in a way, take advantage of those opportunities, the best it is. So enable users, engage them by discovering and then using. So what better demonstrates the value of data by using it to build something? And there are examples in this slide from a bit of everywhere in Europe. The top left is from Latvia. It's simply a service where citizens can say, actually, there is some trash in the street there, please come and fetch it. Simple, down to earth, it does the job, it's based on open data. The tree of truth comes from Estonia. It's simply a visualization of how the country is implementing the global development goals of the UN. Straightforward, also in English, in case there are curious people from abroad, perfect. The black one is from Slovenia. It's the most successful website that offered data about COVID during the pandemic that was not made by government. It was a collaboration with civil society, which is, again, amazing demonstration of value. And at the back, sorry, it's not too visible, is the French Open Data Portal, the one Olivier was talking about, that has 700 applications demonstrated connected with data sets from the French government. It's an enormous amount of work just to select them and publish them. And what best than that to demonstrate that you can actually build something. If you move to the next one, Sam, please. Researching. So we are lucky at the European Data Portal because we have funding from the European Union to perform original research, in a way like also the Open Data Institute does. Just come to the website to see for yourself. There is so much that still needs to be assessed and explored, from demonstrating the impact, the economic impact of open data that can help, say, your civil servants to find the budget to actually demonstrate that there is a business case for doing it. It's not just because someone said it's nice to do. All of the analytical report and research we do can be used to communicate the value of open data. And we also have the privilege every year to run something we call the Open Data Maturity Assessment that assesses the maturity developed by the member states over time. And it has become a systematic reference for the countries to learn from each other. So, oh, I performed well this year, perhaps I can relax. No, look what France is doing. Look what Spain are doing. What the perhaps smaller country, bigger countries, federal countries, non-federal. Each of the 27 have their own peculiarities, little problems and advantages. And of course, educating and telling story. There's a little nice inner reference to the ODI there that was with us in the first iteration of the project. Still, a lot of our audience is looking for training to learn. And we haven't stopped. It's been around for a while. We still need to offer training. People still need to learn. And one of the best ways to learn is also through stories. Over the last spring, we ran a dedicated section of the website for COVID-19. And we observed that our audience split almost equally between the actual data and curated content describing how data was serving citizens and businesses during COVID, how it could be used for rebuilding. And we were surprised. We thought the content was a bit too difficult, or instead it got exactly the same audience as the rest. And again, it's a bit expensive to deliver, but it's the more kind of mature content that today, I believe, our kind of audience is looking for engagement. And the next one, please, penultimate one. Communicating, that's obvious perhaps. So through news, through engaging with the users on social media, and the example of the early data portals that now are starting creating systematic upstream channels for communications. Again, France is a great example. You can go to a dataset page and start commenting about it. The European data portal in the next iteration will do something similar. Users can contribute better versions of the datasets, can write the documentation for you. Remember, we are not like a statistical institution that is due to be very squared and precise. We are more of a platform for the engagement of the actual users. So why would we just draw a wall between us, publish it out and say, oh, we're done, thank you. And finally, the next one is the one I expect a lot of interest over the next couple of years. Agnieszka, I believe, named the high-value datasets. So for the very first time, Europe will start pushing the member states to converge on publishing the same data in around the same format semantically. And it is due June, don't tell them, I have a feeling that they will be a bit late, but the direction is the right one. Sooner than later, you will be able to run, for example, your scripts, if you're a data scientist, in a way that is almost seamless across multiple sources from multiple states. Now, I don't promise you this for June, but that is the direction. And this is the very first time it's happening. Write it down, high-value datasets, and those 6 areas you see there are the ones of focus. There are so many areas that have not been explored yet. Also talking to statistical institutions, for example, data describing socioeconomic phenomenon around the borders between countries is a bit of a black hole at the moment because each country is usually studying only their own thing. And yes, I mean, you can go on, sorry, in the interest of time. Just a last note to remind all of us that it's not just about open data. Possibly it doesn't even make sense anymore to talk about open on one side and data sharing on the other. Europe, again, has started 2 years ago, another kind of sister project to the first one to support data sharing instead, the support center for data sharing that you see there. I won't spend too much time because I really want the audience to have time for questions, but all of those resources, in case it wasn't clear, are for you. They're open, they're accessible. It's the European taxpayer paying for you, but it's fine. We're okay if you're from America. Come, so just use us and take a look at what we're doing. And it's nice to close on one of our commissioners because we are coming for you, Americans. So we are defining today a truly European approach to data sharing. There is so much strong will by European politicians to enable the best possible environment for data sharing and free flow of data. We talk about a sovereign single market, and you know already that we have a very strict regulation protecting, for example, the personal data of our citizens. You need to catch up. You don't have that much time. So please roll up your sleeves and give us some kind of competition. We need the challenge there. And I would say this completes my part, and thank you.
Fabulous. Thanks, Gianfranco. Thanks, Olivier. Thanks, Agnieszka. And thank you, Beatriz. So we have about 8 minutes left of this session. So apologies that we've all kind of talked at length, but I think it was all good stuff. I thought I'd just quickly look in the chat and see if any questions are coming through. It doesn't look like it. We will be sharing the recording. And if there's any questions at all from the panel, if you'd like for the panel, or any kind of comments or reflections on what was just presented, then please either raise your hand or pop a question or a comment in the chat box and we'll come to you. Would anyone like to respond? I guess questions from our side, you know, in terms of what you've heard today, does this kind of reflect the reality that you see in your own kind of jurisdictions? Are there any types of data that you've been looking for, trying to get hold of, that you've been unable to get hold of? Do they fall within those 6 areas that the EU is looking at? You know, any reflections at all? Oh, and you let citizens know of these engagement opportunities. Can you speak about outreach techniques? I will first defer that to my colleagues in Europe. Would anyone like to take that?
We can give the easy answer that is also the most immediate one. We need to invest heavily in search engine optimization, for example. So Europe cannot advertise what we do. We need the users to find us, but it's a bit of a political kind of constraint. Don't worry too much about it. But the idea is, if we are effective with our metadata and we let both commercial and less commercial search engines to find us, the content will be out there. I believe today, if you actually search for government data in Europe, Google will respond to you straight away, perhaps with a link from us or from their own Google dataset search. Now, it's not necessarily ideal. We still need people to find out about us directly, but it is a start. I don't know, Agnieszka or Beatriz, if you want to add anything.
Yes, for outreach, we can say that we use a lot our portal itself to post the news articles and use also like promotional banners if we publish something new or interesting or that we think that we want to draw people's attention to. And social media, of course, the one that is very much used in open data domain is Twitter, but more and more a lot of content for professionals is published also on LinkedIn, and we are also publishing everything now on YouTube. We think it's really important to record what we are doing, because very often people do not have time at this precise moment to participate in a conference or in a call, but they can watch it afterwards. And as Gianfranco mentioned, for instance, those videos that are published on the European data portals are incredible material. So we are trying to put online as much as possible. So whatever is not restricted from, let's say, personal data protection point of view, or doesn't contain confidential information, is worth putting online.
Thanks, Agnieszka. Olivier, would you like to pick up Kate's question?
Yes, thank you, Sam. So Kate just asked, would you say your findings are universal, or should all jurisdictions/municipalities conduct their own process or better understanding how to engage folks in open data in their locale? That's a really, really great question. And of course, some of it will be common. There will be questions, for instance, on on technology that will be common, and that requires actually a global take on it. But some of the research we've done, and actually if you look on the ODI's website for open cities, you'll see case studies on a number of cities, including Amsterdam, Helsinki, Barcelona, and so on and so forth, and our own engagement with like London. There is a need and there is a desire for each locale to have their own strategy in how they engage, because you're here to create a community, you need to do that according to whatever culture there is. And that's why Barcelona, with very, very strong kind of citizen participation with something like Decidim, whereas at the moment London is much more about how to make public and private organizations work together. Each locale can have their own way and their own set of priorities, and therefore the implementation will differ. I don't know if either of my other co-panelists wants to talk about how you've seen that, but definitely on my end, I've seen variety, and I think it's a good thing.
I may add a couple of things that are a great example of these differences coming from the legislative systems or simply from culture, as you said. I spoke about the high value datasets earlier. And some of it regard the data that describes companies, like companies registers and so on. Depending on the country you go to, this will be considered strictly personal data because it describes the name of the directors, or absolutely the right of the citizens to know because it helps me making business safely. It's the same continent. But so the part of our effort is to get them to find an agreement where the data can be published homogeneously without sacrificing its effectiveness for use.
Absolutely, Gianfranco. Just to add to some of that, I think just there are a few questions that have come through talking about local jurisdictions and different kind of levels of geography, I guess. And I think from our perspective, certainly on the standards piece, and we're looking a lot at metadata these days and how we can best describe our data. I think the way forward is looking at global interoperable standards, and that's something that we're very, very keen on. Schema.org, these kind of organizations are kind of putting things out, and we're very keen to make sure that regardless of geographical jurisdiction, that we're able to work alongside one another, and we're comparing apples and apples, as it were. So that's really important. Okay, excellent. I think we're kind of going to be wrapping up shortly because we've only got 1 minute left. So I would like to thank my panel, but are there any final closing comments you would like to make on this at all, anyone? Gianfranco, you're off mute. Would you like to say anything?
You cannot mute me. So the I'm Italian. So the just use us. I always repeat that these resources are amazing. Most of the idea, I believe, all of the idea work is in the open. All of our work is in the open and licensed in the open. Probably the UK is doing the same, I guess, in the part of open data. What excuses have you got? Years of research. Not all of it is old enough not to be useful any longer. Just take advantage of this. I mean, Europe is perhaps a little in front of you in terms of experience in this space, but you have everything you need to catch up.
And Beatriz?
I would just like to focus on what Olivier was mentioning about fit for purpose, that the value of data is really on how we use it. So we need to understand and listen to what the users need and make the data available and accessible in the ways and formats that users need. So please talk to us, and so we can make really data fit for the purposes that you need. Thank you.
Agnieszka, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I think that open data is really a long journey. We are still relatively at the beginning. We made a lot of progress in the last 10 years, but there is still a lot ahead of us. And for us, it's really important to engage in the discussion with people who are using the data, because in the end, we are doing it for citizens, and we want to shape it according to the needs. We have to prioritize. We have limited resources, so just help us do it in the right way, and we will follow.
Fabulous. And Olivier, final word from you.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to reiterate what was been said. Is that you know it's been a journey. A lot of these portals have been around for 10, 15 years, but we need to rethink what they are going to be in the next 10, 15 years. I'm going to reiterate what Gianfranco says: is use the insights that have been generated, but also talk to us. I know that my team's going to be working on thinking about what the future should look like. So definitely happy to continue the conversations with anyone here on the panel, but also with you in the participants of the Zoom call today.
Thanks, Olivier. Thank you to everybody. Huge thanks to all my panelists. Fantastic. Thank you all so much for coming out and speaking on this. And I sincerely hope that we can do this in person in the near future. Stay safe, everybody, and have a great weekend. Take care. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks a lot.